So today on CAPPA Live, I have Julie Brill with us. Julie owns and manages Well Pregnancy in Bedford, Massachusetts. She's been teaching childbirth classes and attending births as a midwifery apprentice and doula since 1992. She is a La Leche League leader, a mother of 2 daughters, and an author of the doula anthology, which I love, Round the Circle, doulas share their experiences, which really is like sitting around a circle with lots of doulas and listening to their stories and learning from them. I really love that book, Julie. Julie is also one of our CAPPA faculty. So welcome, Julie.
Awesome, thank you.
So what we're going to be doing here on the CAPPA page is I will ask some of our amazing faculty like Julie Brill to join me to kind of extend the conversation of the blog post that they recently wrote. So you may have seen recently that Julie wrote a post called, and I'm going to show it here underneath. I'll put the link below after our chat, but she wrote a blog post about cord clamping and how patience pays off. So I asked her to join me here to talk a little bit more about cord clamping and also to just talk about anything. So I'm so glad that she was able to make it. And so Julie, tell me a little bit about cord clamping. Just give us like the quick overview of what is it, what's the new terminology, kind of share with us your expertise.
Sure. So when a baby is a fetus, their blood is circulating outside their body through the placenta. That's how it oxygenates. So moment of birth, when they're really still a fetus, a third of their blood is outside of their body. And that's what we call cord blood. But it's the blood that happens to be there in that moment. If they were born 5 minutes later, it would be different blood. It really just is their blood. So there's been a lot of discussion for a couple of decades about when to cut the cord after the baby is born. And so the old term that we were using was delayed cord clamping, which was waiting a minute or sometimes more after they were born so they could get some of their own blood back into their body. And now we're going to call it appropriately timed cord clamping to sort of reflect what we understand now about fetal physiology and cord blood.
Right. Well, I really love that. And I appreciate you sharing the new terminology, appropriately timed cord clamping. That was new terminology to me as well. I have been teaching classes for about 8 years. And I remember when I first started teaching how few of my students had heard of delayed cord clamping. And so now more and more when I teach new parents or expecting parents, and I ask, have you heard of this? Is this something that you've talked to your provider about? More and more, they're like, yes, I've heard of this. I'm asking about this. So what's your experience where you're at in Massachusetts? Are people asking for this? Is it happening routinely?
So it's great that you're starting to see that change, right? That's what we want from prenatal education. Yeah. I'm outside of Boston, and I would say that it's really mixed. So you know, I had my younger daughter at home in the 90s. I was going to home births in the 90s, and the home birth midwives were waiting because they had always waited, you know. So it doesn't seem like a new thing, but there is more and more research, and I think more and more people are aware of the research. And it's a fun thing to talk about in childbirth classes because we actually have research. We talk about so much stuff where we're like, this kind of makes sense, or of course, but Google and see the research on cord blood clamping.
Yeah, I really love it. And I do like that now the alternative wording of calling it appropriately timed. I think that just makes a lot more sense. Like we're not stopping anything. We're actually waiting for the appropriate time. I love that word change.
Exactly.
Kind of like, what's the other one where it's like we used to say we would feed babies on demand, and now we say that we feed them on cue. So it's a little more gentle of like, we're not like babies are demanding to eat.
Exactly. Or we would talk about hunger cues, and now we talk about feeding cues.
Yes, yeah, I really love those slight but really important changes. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's talk a little bit more. Do you have any suggestions for people where maybe this isn't as routine or it's something that they really want? How do they talk to do you have suggestions? Like how do they talk to their providers about cord clamping and appropriately timed cord clamping?
Right. So one of the big obstacles that people often run into waiting to clamp the cord is that there still are some providers who want to keep the baby low as long as the cord is connected. They want the baby below the placenta, and that really turns out to be no physiology behind that. So discussing that ahead of time, talking about the research behind that is removing one barrier. One of the things that a lot of my students have found really helpful is to, rather than put a time limit on it, like I would like to wait a minute or 2 minutes, they'll say something like, I'd like you to wait to clamp the cord until we ask. Because it comes out, it's a miracle. This person that wasn't here is here. They smell amazing. They're alert. They're warm. People are blown away by the moment. And by the time they come around to, oh yeah, could you do something about this cord? It's time. As opposed to having somebody come in and feel if it's still pulsing or, it's been 2 minutes or whatever, because often it does feel like an interruption to the parents with this new baby coming in and clamping the cord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really like helping to have those conversations with your providers before you're in the labor and delivery room or
Exactly.
wherever you're having your baby, having those conversations. And what about with our partners? Do you find that it's important for the birthing person to really talk to their partner about their wishes so that they, as they're like, oh, here's our baby, and everybody is kind of like you said, welcoming this new person to the world. Is it good to have more than one person, or maybe your doula? Who else in the room should know that these are your wishes?
Yeah, I think it's great when the partners talk about it ahead of time with each other. It's one of the things I see a lot of times they'll get excited about in a childbirth class. One, because we have the research, but two, because it's really something that they feel like they can be impactful with. Oftentimes it's the partner who's saying, yeah, remember the birth plan? Like, no, not yet. We're not ready. And then the mom can just kind of be in that, I just had a baby zone.
Right. That's really great. I love that. Yeah, giving anyone kind of more information to ask for what they want, I think is really powerful and empowering. Right. That's really great. So I know that you're an IBCLC, and for anyone who's watching, can you tell us what an IBCLC stands for?
Yes, so it's an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. We're the clinicians who help with breastfeeding.
Awesome. So not only are you a member of our CAPPA faculty, but you also are an IBCLC. So that kind of has given you lots of extra experience and skills in supporting people with breastfeeding. So I thought you would be a great person to talk to about how you can prepare for, like how you can talk about how cord clamping can also impact breastfeeding. So will you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I think this is fascinating and maybe something that a lot of people aren't aware of yet, but it comes into play in a couple of ways. So first of all, when babies have immediate cord clamping and they lose a third of their blood volume, they are going to have significantly less iron stores. And so often one of the reasons that pediatricians talk about supplementing with formula is because of concerns about the baby's iron level. So when babies are able to get their full blood volume and the iron levels that are supposed to be there are there from birth, they have higher iron levels at even a year when they've already been eating solids for months. So just doing that simple thing at birth kind of eliminates one of the reasons down the road that often people are facing supplementation when they don't want to. And the other thing is much more immediate. When babies have their appropriate blood volume, they don't lose as much birth weight. And that's another really common reason why babies are supplemented. People are concerned about 7% weight loss is concerning, 10% is too much. And so a lot of times, one of the factors that's played into that is the immediate cord clamping.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I love learning new things and sharing it with our audience here. So to me, this kind of is one of the reasons why you might want to take a breastfeeding class when you're expecting, so that there's things like this that you could potentially learn, or even a childbirth education class, which I know, of course, we both are like, yes, take the classes.
Right.
So will you talk a little bit more about how some of that preparation before labor and birth can kind of impact some of these decisions?
Yeah, it would be my hope that not only are people taking childbirth classes prenatally, but breastfeeding classes as well. And I think sometimes when you're pregnant, especially first baby, and none of it totally feels real yet, you aren't focused on the baby and the postpartum. You're just sort of focused on surviving labor. But if you can think a little bit ahead to breastfeeding, anything you can learn prenatally is going to help you in those early days. And there's a couple of studies floating around that show when people learn position and latch, which is what this whole dance is about, understand position and latch before they have their baby, they're much more likely to sail through that early time with less nipple soreness afterwards.
And that's a big, something that a lot of people worry about. So
Right.
I think that, you know, we can definitely shout from the rooftops that when you understand a little bit more about breastfeeding, that it makes it a little bit easier, or like you say, just to say, like, you will likely have less nipple soreness then after
Right.
your baby arrives.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful benefit of taking a breastfeeding class. What else? Let's talk about how does, oh, somebody's coming in my house. I don't know if
One of your kids, Jill.
So let's talk about, how does your choice of a birth location, how does that impact breastfeeding?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting too. So many people are focused on, again, labor and birth, understandably, right?
Yeah.
And less on the postpartum. But if you're able to be in a birthplace that supports breastfeeding and you don't have to advocate as much for yourself, it is so much easier in the first few days. So looking at breastfeeding rates, looking at whether they're baby friendly, which is meeting 10 guidelines from the World Health Organization that they're following to support breastfeeding, can make a really big difference. I know there's a hospital here, and really their lactation is fine, but they have a policy against skin to skin and postpartum. And so sometimes things that you're not even expecting are really going to be impactful on breastfeeding, not always the way.
Right. And I think you're really, it's really helpful when you can find those things out ahead of time. So either
Exactly.
you know, talk to your provider, or, you know, and at CAPPA, we're all about building bridges with providers. And I think having good communication is a really important start to that. So, so yeah, I love just asking some questions.
Exactly.
It's huge, especially if you know what you want. And I think when you take a childbirth education class, when you take a breastfeeding class, all those things really help you know, like, ooh, these are some questions I should ask. It gives you
Right.
a lot more preparation time to
I agree.
plan.
I think that's actually a reason that people take classes, although they're not aware of it, but it's really values clarification. How do I feel about epidurals or breastfeeding or circumcision or whatever it is? How does my partner feel? Having those conversations.
I completely agree. Well, obviously we agree, right? That's why that's why we do this work at CAPPA,
Yeah.
so that more people can be educated on those kinds of things, so we can really provide great opportunities for learning. So what other tips do you have for preparing for breastfeeding while you're still expecting your baby?
So I always think about this class I took in like the 9th grade. We had this English teacher and she was great. And she just talked about surrounding yourself with people who were doing the things you wanted to do. So like not hanging out in a study group where people were talking about how hard it was and they weren't, showing up for class. And I think if you want to breastfeed, if you can hang out with people who are breastfeeding, it's a really big difference. So some people are lucky to kind of just have a group of friends, but if you don't, and a lot of people don't, finding a support group, whether it's the Leche League or Nursing Mothers Council or something at your local hospital, where you can hang out with people who are doing it. The other thing, if you can't do that, or in addition, is just videos. So if you have 5 minutes, go on your phone and watch videos of, newborn crawl, laid back nursing, biological nurturing, see what it looks like when you're breastfeeding, because a lot of people just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard this story. So if anybody has like a better retelling of this story,
the gorilla story?
I apologize, but I was reading something a while back about, I think it was gorillas that were in a zoo. And do you know the story, Julie?
I do. It's an old Leche League story.
Yes, maybe that's where I heard it, at Little League a long time ago. And the gorilla was really struggling with breastfeeding, and so they brought in some nursing mothers, and they breastfed near the gorilla, and so the gorilla was like, "Oh, okay, this is what I was doing."
I love that story because it shows it's not just humans; it's higher primates that have learned what to do by seeing other people do it. And we don't necessarily live in a village surrounded by people who are doing it.
Exactly. So I think that tip to even prenatally go, like, of course, support after you have your baby is very important, but even prenatally to go to a group and sit in and listen to mothers who are breastfeeding and just watch mothers breastfeeding, going online. I think that you're so right that makes a huge impact on people, their success after they have their baby. So thank you for that tip, Julie.
This is fun, Jill.
Yay, it is fun. I mean, just like your book, Around the Circle, I cannot think of a time that I've chatted with doulas or childbirth educators, IBCLCs, really anyone in this birth worker field that I'm not just like, ooh, tell me more. I love, even if it's information that I already know, hearing it from different people, I think is really valuable. So, why don't you, as we kind of get ready to sign off, I promised you that I wouldn't keep you on for too long. And I want to, even though I could sit here and talk to you all day, I know I have to feed my kids dinner and you have stuff to do. Yep. So before we go, will you tell us a little bit more, if you have any upcoming trainings, or tell us a little bit more about what you do as a member of CAPPA's faculty?
Sure. So I'm on labor doula and childbirth educator faculty for CAPPA. And I have trainings, I'm outside of Boston. So I have trainings in Westford, Mass in November, both labor doula and childbirth educator. And then some in 2020 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for anybody who's watching, you can always go to our website. You can look at the CAPPA blog on our website. It's CAPPA, CAPPA.net. And then the blog, that you can find Julie's recent article about cord clamping if you want to read a little bit more about that. And if you're looking for training, then you can also search on our website for upcoming trainings, whether they're in Massachusetts with Julie for labor doula or childbirth educator, or all over the country in Canada. So, so yeah, Julie, thank you so much for joining me.
This was great.
It was great. I'm so glad that we did it. And my hope for anybody who's watching is that we will be going live weekly to talk to our faculty members and learn from them, get a little more insight, and so that they can kind of extend what they shared in their recent blog post. So thanks again, Julie. And I hope you have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for watching.